Hey, welcome everybody to the premiere, the first ever Statman and Robin podcast. Oh man, this is exciting. I am Statman. I'm the excited Statman. Jim Johnson, Statman is not my given name. And here's my co-host.
Holy introductory episode, Statman. Hi,
You only
everyone.
get a couple of those an episode, by the way.
Exactly. No, I couldn't resist. Um, yes, hello, everyone. I'm Robin Haines. That is, Robin is my actual first name. I'm going to talk about that a little bit during this podcast. Um, but we're excited to get started with episode number one, as it were. We're going to be focusing mostly on Orioles, Baltimore Colts, Baltimore Bullets, and Maryland Terps, football and basketball history. That's primarily what we're going to be focusing on most of these podcasts. But as we move along, we're definitely some other things and other teams we'll be talking about.
Absolutely. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, Jim, do you have? We do want to let people maybe get to know us a little bit um, in this first and maybe the first few podcasts. So, Jim, do you want to get started with a special Baltimore sports memory for you?
Yeah, and by the way, both of us are freaking delightful. So people are really going to want to get to know us, I'm sure. But yeah, let's start with the Orioles because I think that's really the first experiences you and I bonded over. Although it took us some years to actually go to an Oriole game together. But
Yeah, that's right.
speaking of, I think the first one I want to get to is one of my favorite and maybe my favorite Oriole games, and it was August 5th, 1983. Brooks Robinson, Hall of
Ooh.
Fame. Appreciate. You see, I knew the light of recognition would come pretty quickly with that. Brooks had just gone in the Hall of Fame. That previous Sunday, it was a Friday night. Almost 40,000 people at Memorial Stadium because everybody loved a Brooks Robinson retirement party. And this was, I think, like the third one he had, and he made light of it himself.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was met with a long rain delay, a long, steady rain that was somewhere around 2 hours.
I
And
think so.
it didn't stop completely. It was in a light drizzle, I think, when they did the ceremonies, and then they finally started the game. And I still have my scorebook that I kept from that game. I was able
Wow.
to pull that one off the shelf, a little worse for wear, but still perfectly legible. I used to be one of those guys, and well, stats man, what am I going to do? I came by it naturally. And now I point that out because that became significant. It was a pretty nondescript game until the ninth inning. The Orioles were down 5-2, and it was who was it had the leadoff single? Al Bumbry. They were at the top of the order,
Yep.
and Al Bumbry uh, got a scratch hit to second base and was on with leadoff hit, and then Disco Danny Ford came up. Crowd was getting a little excited. Boom! He hit into a 4-3 double play. So
I
two out
remember.
on. Orioles are down 5-3, and everybody. No, it was. No, it was 4-2. I knew they were down by two. Okay, it was 4-2. They were down, and people started going home because the ninth inning had started about 12:50 something that night, and the American League had a curfew rule then. I don't know if they still do, where you couldn't start an inning after 1 o'clock in the morning. And they just squeezed that in. So it was a little after 1 in the morning where everybody's like, oh, okay, well, that's it. And then the magic started. The Orioles got 5 consecutive singles, and the fifth one brought in the winning run. And it was just, and we stayed because we always stay, even when we probably shouldn't stay. We stayed. We both had to work the next day. We both had to go in on Saturday and work, as I
Yes,
remember.
yes, I remember that well.
Yeah, that was not the most productive day I ever had. I'm sure you can say the same. Even though we were young, and I don't want to say young and stupid, but we were still young. And okay, how well? This isn't fair because I didn't remember this. I remember who got the game-winning hit. How many of the players do you remember in that cycle? I did this to you years ago, and you rattled them off. You rattled off all five hitters in order.
I vaguely remember that. That was a long time ago. Let me see if I can do it. It was definitely Cal Ripken, Eddie Murray, oh, John Lowenstein,
Yep.
and was it Ken Singleton? And then
Yes,
Rich
it
Dowd
was.
got the game winner. Is that it?
You were still
Okay.
gold. Those were the five. Yes,
That
indeed.
definitely falls in the category when my wife hears stuff like that. And I know
Yeah.
your wife is the same way. Like, I
Yeah,
can't.
you can't remember what you're supposed to get at the grocery store. Yeah. Different parts of the memory.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
more data space allotted to one than the other. Just the way we are. So that was an incredible game, and in 1983 was an incredible season. It was just so much fun. It was really the peak of the Orioles magic era from 79 to 83. Obviously, they won the World Series that year. Even if they hadn't won the World Series, it probably would still be my favorite year because they had a lot of fun, strange things happen that year.
They sure did. They sure did.
And
And you want to talk about a strange statistic from that Orioles team that ended up
yes,
being the world champs?
yes.
Two different times during the regular season, they lost 7 games in a row.
Oh,
Two.
that's right. Yes.
It's kind of hard to believe that that team that would lose 7 games twice in a season would
Yeah.
win the World Series. So
Now, one of them, I think, was toward the end of the season
I
when
think
they
you're
pretty much had the division wrapped up. But still, that is, yeah, that's a pretty oddball stat.
right.
And there's probably a couple other games in that particular season we can cover in later podcasts. But that was definitely my favorite team. And let me add one more thing. My favorite under the radar player was Rich Dowd. Not just because of that game, but he just had a pesky habit of getting the big hits. He was not that great. He was a powerhouse hitter in college, All
Mhm.
American player at Southern Cal when they were a powerhouse team. But he had a streak, an errorless streak. I looked this up and wrote it down recently, and I don't have that in front of me. Let me see. Yes, 74 consecutive games without an error, which was at that time a record. Might still be. He didn't have a ton of range, but by God, if you hit the ball to him, he caught it.
Yep. Everything that came to him, he got it. Yep.
Yeah. So he was the epitome of a steady player, and
Right.
I just love that about him. He was probably my favorite under the radar player. How about you?
Um, well, I'm not going to start off with an under the radar player. I'm going to hold off on that a little bit. Um, so again, if you're talking about Orioles and their glory years, the Orioles and their glory years, you got to talk about Frank Robinson, and he's my all-time favorite Oriole player.
Yep.
Um, and his career, kind of goes without saying just how great he was. Um, and in another podcast, there's a little teaser. One of these podcasts down the road, I really want to get into a deep dive about his career achievements in terms of awards and accomplishments that if you roll it all together, and I'm including as a player and a manager, if you
Mhm.
roll it all together, it will never be equaled. So again, that's a little teaser. We'll get into it in a lot more
Worth getting
detail.
into.
Not
Yes.
today, not today. But Frank Robinson, for me personally, um, July 28th, 1971, um, my 13th birthday, and I'm at the game. They're playing the A's, Oakland A's, who they would meet in the league championship series, and defeat them and go on to the World Series for the third year in a row. But that game on my birthday, um, Frank Robinson. Well, the Orioles were down 2-0 coming into the bottom of the ninth. Really weird thing about that game, the A's scored their 2 runs in the same inning. I think the fourth or fifth inning, and it was because Brooks Robinson made 3 errors in one inning, and
Yes.
the A's got those 2 runs because of that. He made two errors on one play. So everybody's kind of in shock. Can't believe it that
Right.
Brooks would do that. But the bottom of the ninth, the Orioles are down by 2, and Frank usually batted third, and ahead of him, Don Buford and Merv Rettenman were batting number 1 and 2, and they both got base hits. Um, John Blue Moon Odom was the starting pitcher. They took him out. Frank Robinson's coming up. We got 2 men on, and they brought in this guy named Raleigh Fingers.
Oh.
So Hall of Fame reliever there, and one of the first truly great closers.
Yep.
When closers were kind of becoming more of a thing. Anyway, Raleigh Fingers comes in, first pitch, Frank hits it out of the park for a 3-run homer. Game over, Orioles win. It's a walk-off. And the little extra tidbit, Reggie Jackson was playing right field for the A's. And my seats were actually kind of a little bit down the right field line. So game's over. The A's leave the field. The Orioles leave the field. Reggie Jackson stood motionless in right field. In other words, he's just dumbfounded by what happened. It was several minutes before he left the field, and it was actually because some of the fans were, really kind of getting on him.
Yeah.
I do have this vague memory of a Baltimore City cop just kind of strolling out like, "Hey, Reggie, come on. We don't want things to get ugly here." Who knows what he said? But eventually, Reggie did leave the field. But as much as anything, I really, and I've heard Reggie Jackson talk about Frank Robinson and the respect he had for Frank Robinson. I think in a way for Reggie, that was his way of showing some respect, that he was just dumbfounded that Frank would end the game like that. So anyway, happened on my 13th birthday. I mean, I can't go wrong with that memory.
Well, and that reminds me, speaking of Frank, also in 1971, Game 6 of the World Series, when he was the winning run at third with 1 out, and Brooks was up, and he bailed Brooks out again because Brooks hit a shallow fly ball.
Yes.
I forget if it was center or left field.
Center field, I believe. Yep.
Okay, and there's Frank, 35 years old. Both his legs are hurting him, and somehow he had enough juice to force a high throw to the catcher and slide in underneath Manny Sanguillen with the winning run. Because runs were getting hard to come by for the Orioles in that World Series. And he won Game 6. They were down 3-2, so they had to win that game to force the Game 7. And that was just such a, you don't hear much about his legs, and his legs are pretty well gone at that point. But that's just the kind of player he was. He made the big plays, and he sucked it up and channeled his youth for a few seconds and made a pretty good dash in from third to win a game.
Right.
And season deciding game, really.
Right. And if you look at his overall career, if you're not that familiar with him and you want to go back and look him up, you'll see that he only played 6 seasons in Baltimore.
Right.
But when you win the World Series 4 out of 6 seasons, that ain't bad. And that's why he's remembered.
Yeah, you get to the World Series 4 out of 6.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's, and only once since then, in all those years afterwards, have they gotten to the World Series. So, yeah.
Twice, 79 and 83. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But still, yeah.
But still, a very long time ago.
Yes, it is. Yes. So, you got any favorite? Well, Um, anything else you wanted to share with the listeners about the Orioles? Because you were a little young to get into the '66 World Championship team, but I know you were into the 1970 team very much, right?
Yes, yes. And I remember I don't remember 66 so well. Um, I wish I remembered it a little bit better.
Yeah.
But 69, I remember really well. And I remember the 69 World Series, watching those games. Really, I remember watching games three, four, and five in New York, um, where, the Mets pulled off the big upset.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think for any Orioles fan from back in those days, again, I mentioned it before, the glory years.
Right.
I don't know what else to call
Well,
it.
that's a pretty good way to refer to it. Well, and we met. I think it was during the World Series of 1970. It was right around that time that I moved into your area and met you in the seventh grade.
Okay,
And so I've never claimed the Oriole because I was not an Oriole. I grew up a few miles away from RFK Stadium.
sure, sure.
So, I grew up a Washington fan and got a small dose of the pain that resulted in. And, especially back in the day, although I think there's still some element of that, is Washington and Baltimore just were like, oil and water. They just did not mix very well. So, but then when I, got into essentially Oriole and Baltimore sports territory, I found, hey, this winning thing is pretty fun. And they had great teams to root for. The Orioles, I claimed the Colts championship a few months later because I was there for pretty much the whole season, and after that, and yeah, it was such a different atmosphere, and of course, the Senators moving out a year after I moved away from them. So I'm like, well, hey, sorry guys, I guess I was keeping holding you in there, and then they wound up in Dallas where they've done okay for themselves. But it was quite a treat, uh, growing up with a winning team. And I know you recently did a video for the Baltimore Sports Babe Ruth Hall of Fame in Baltimore,
Yeah,
and we can talk about that whole. I mean, that whole backdrop is worth a podcast. The 1970-71 season, which you're not really going to get any better than that as far as a city and their sports teams.
yeah,
So
yeah. 70, 71. I mean, Orioles win the series in October of 70. The Baltimore Colts win the Super Bowl in January of 71. And then in April of 71, the Baltimore Bullets, uh,
right.
made it to the NBA Finals somehow. uh, and they didn't win the finals, but to have two reigning champions and a third runner up in three major sports, very rare for that to happen in major pro sports history. So that was a very special time.
Oh yeah, well, and that bullet season you're talking about, the shocker was that they went into Madison Square Garden and knocked off the Knicks in Game 7 of the Eastern Finals, and that was the only time in that a 4-year stretch from 70 to 73 that the Knicks did not make the finals. And they were the defending champion, and they won it again in 73. So that was, yeah, nice to win the championship, but boy, that was quite an accomplishment knocking the Knicks out.
Hmm.
It's still viewed as a enormous upset.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back and let's talk about the Colts for a little bit. Um, you grew up a Colts fan, and they were kind of my secondary team for a little while. Then they were my primary team, and back and forth. I always liked it. I never disliked the Colts. But again, that stretch, and we're going to talk a lot 70s and 80s. But for the Colts, probably better off sticking to the 70s. Uh, what memories stick out to you, or what players stick out to you from that era of Colts football?
Well, for me, really, more of a golden era for the Colts was after Johnny Unitas was gone.
Right.
Um, and again, I was older. I was in high school, teenager. So the Colts from in 75, 76, and 77, they won the division each year. That was the Burt Jones team. That's really where my best Colts memories are
Yeah.
with those teams. They never managed to even win a single playoff game, unfortunately. So that's one reason they're not as well known
Right.
in NFL history. But especially that 75 Colts team, a lot of young players. Nobody
Yeah.
really knew what to expect. And they actually won their first game and then lost their next four. So
Yeah.
everybody's like, here we go again. Uh, but a 1-4 start, and they won their next 9 games in a row. Only a 14 game season back then.
Right. Yeah, they had no margin for error and they didn't make any. And of course, that next to last game of the season was the vital one, the 10-7 overtime win over the Dolphins at Memorial
Yes,
Stadium. They kind of brought back a little bit of the flavor of the old days.
yes, yes.
That was
Um,
an old,
if you were
knock out, drag out game, wasn't it?
right now, if you were around back then, I mean, you remember watching that game. It was played in Baltimore, but in the fog,
Yep.
which got worse as the game went on. And I've talked to a few people who were there, and it was sometimes tough to tell what was going on TV
Yep.
and in person, depending on where you were on the field or where the ball was on the field. It was tough to tell what was happening. But another thing about that game, the Colts field goal kicker, a guy named Tony Linhart, he's always going to be known in Baltimore sports history. Um, Not a long field goal at all by today's standards,
Right.
but again, back in that era uh, of the NFL, nobody thinks about soccer style kickers, but not all teams had quote unquote soccer style kickers back then. But
Yeah.
most teams were uh, adopting that in their kickers. But today, the field goal that he made would have been considered a chip shot. But back then, even though those soccer style kickers were generally more accurate, it wasn't a given that he was going to make it.
No, there really weren't givens in the kicking game back then. It's if you were over, say, 60%, you're probably making the Pro Bowl.
Right.
You 60% these days, you're cut.
Right. But
Yeah.
yeah, it wouldn't be unusual for your kicker to have a game where he misses 3 out of 4 field
Yeah.
goals and maybe none of them were over 40 yards.
Yep.
But again, like you just said, Jim, if that happens in today's game, you're looking for work
Yes.
unless
That's right.
you're one of the great kickers. But
Well, and my favorite Colts memory actually goes back a little bit before yours to 1971, and that was I forget if the Colts were playing the Dolphins that game or what, but the famous or infamous, depending on your view, Mike Curtis game, the keep off my turf game, and Curtis was really my favorite. Non Johnny Unitas because I didn't see Unitas was well past his prime before I ever saw him. All right, Curtis was just coming into his prime, and I remember seeing it was Bill Curry say that Curtis was the most unpleasant man to be around on game day because he
in
just
game
had
day, yeah,
yeah, and a couple of the players. Well, what I'm referring to is a drunk fan ran out on the field to try to steal the ball, and he made the mistake of doing that while the Colts defense was on the field, and Curtis laid him out with a very clean shot, and he got up and staggered, as he was lit. And they later the guy sued him, and it got thrown out of court.
right.
But a couple of the players were kind of upset. It's like, man, you can't do that to the fans. This is Bill Curry saying this again. And Curtis is like, look, This man violated a city ordinance. I was enforcing it. That was it. How can you not love a guy like that?
Right.
And he was from kind of sort of my neighborhood, Rockville, Maryland, Montgomery County. Went to Richard Montgomery High School and all that, and was a fullback. And Don Shula would say, yeah, he was a genius to try to have Mike Curtis play fullback, and then figured out he was a linebacker. But man, he was old school tough with old school attitude, and not a big guy, but he could cover territory.
Hmm.
He was outside linebacker, and he could cover the whole field. And then when he met you, it was an unpleasant experience for whoever he hit. Yeah, he was something fierce. And unfortunately, he was one of the men later on that had no surprise he had the CTE, brain damage, and you know, but boy, he was a fierce and fun football player to watch. That's for sure. Um, so okay, we've talked about I think where we're gonna probably keep a lot of our focus of this show is the Orioles and the Colts because they were the much bigger deal. Now we're definitely going to talk about the Bullets. Hey, they were good and had Hall of Fame players.
You sure did.
Even though they never did draw very well in Baltimore, and wound up with in the arena with the Cap Center, and that was the fans could sniff it coming a couple years out because when Abe Poland won the expansion franchise for the Capitals hockey team, well, they weren't going to play in Baltimore. So, what was he going to do? There was not a large arena in the DC area besides Cole Fieldhouse, and there was no way they were going to play ice hockey there.
Right.
The Bullets, I think, had started playing the occasional weekend game in Cole, and turned out those games at Cole were like a neutral court or an away game because that's the thing about Washington is a lot of fans came out from DC to see them. And
Right.
a lot of them were the Knicks fans, the Lakers fans, and the Celtics fans that had migrated. The old deal about Washington not being anybody's hometown. It was definitely the deal back in the 70s. But, the Bullets also made a major impact in our sports history. And we went to some of the great games at the Capitol Center that we'll definitely be podcasting about, and then of course the '78 championship. Now you said your opinion was that we should definitely, and you're more directly a Baltimore guy than I am, Rob. So I yield to you. But you think we should keep the Bullets definitely in that mix, even though their time in Baltimore was relatively short.
Yeah, they were. Franchise was only in Baltimore for 10 seasons,
Yeah.
uh, but it, it did hurt when they moved out of Baltimore. But given the fact that they, you know, just kind of moved down the road, um, and really were not in Washington, they were still in Maryland, and they were, not hard. The Cap Center wasn't hard to get to if you wanted to keep following the Bullets down there. And again, that was the era of indoor and outdoor newly built facilities. The tendency back then was to move them away from the
Right.
downtown setting
Right.
and have easy access to interstate, beltway, what have you. Uh, but that trend is certainly over the years.
Yes.
Aren't very many stadiums that are built in that kind of setting anymore.
No, football stadiums
Yeah, right,
are,
right,
are the main one. 'Cause you can put a football stadium, I think, just about anywhere, and still draw people. But yeah, baseball and an arena. Yeah, you better be near the city at this point, and it's really a much better idea if you have public transportation.
right. Well, football. I mean, basketball and baseball. You're talking about a lot of weeknight games,
Yep,
so you need to make it,
very
easily
important.
easily
Yeah,
accessible into in a downtown area where you can, draw people that aren't going to have time to travel to and from.
Right now, of course, we're also going to talk about the Terps because the Terps are kind of the only team that you can really say historically has always been a shared team. Now, the Orioles had a large fanship in Washington after the Senators left because they marketed there very wisely. And they drew a lot of fans there, and that helped them hit the 2 million mark in the early 80s. But the Terps are probably they're a little closer to Washington than they are Baltimore, but it's the state's university, that kind of thing. And there's plenty of support for the Terps in Baltimore, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah, always has been, and a great pipeline in terms of players.
Oh yeah.
From Baltimore City, the Baltimore metro area, ending up to playing their college career at Maryland.
Right. So, and a couple in particular that we'll touch on that are real favorites. But yeah, now, of course, we had the national championship, which is kind of out of our date range, but I think we'll probably make an exception for that because we'll be coming up fairly soon. 25th anniversary of that is next year.
Oh, that's right.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So, yeah, I know. So we will definitely have to talk about that. I don't think anybody will begrudge us as we celebrated that night. Oh my God, did we celebrate? So, all right. Well, then, any closing thoughts for our first show? I think we've done this without doing or saying anything stupid, and I'm very proud of that.
Right. Yeah, yeah. We think we got over the opening broadcast jitters pretty well.
We got first hit and we were ready to go, right?
Right, right. Yeah. No, I'm excited. This has been awesome. Um, so much more to talk about down the
Oh,
road,
yeah. Oh,
but
yeah.
we hope everybody keeps giving us a look see every 2 weeks. So we plan to see you in 2 weeks for our next podcast, and every 2 weeks after that.
That's right. That's a promise, not a threat, although whatever works, right? All right. Well, that's it for this episode. That was Robin Haines. I'm the Statman, Jim Johnson. We thank you for listening or watching, and we remind you that it is good to look back as long as you live forward. Take care, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.